So I'm going to call advisory committee meeting to order at 6:32 on May the 5th. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right. Hello to everybody. Claire is here. Hey, Claire. There's Judy. Okay, so we're all here except for Tim. So just to be, I don't know who Marcy Jones is. Does anybody know who Marcy is? Morrow Inn is probably Marty Healy.
Marty and Sarah are here.
Okay, so I see those two, but Morrow Inn is probably Marty Healy. Jason, so he may want to come over at some point soon to participate in this. So let's watch for him to raise his hand. Okay. Yeah. All righty. Let's start with let's bring Marty and Sarah over.
Hello.
Marty, that was a great picture that just flashed.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a recent one. It was on a college tour and the wind was blowing my hair just right.
Oh, it was definitely blowing your hair. Your hair looked good.
Nice to see all of you.
Nice to see you too. So do you know everybody here, Marty?
I know names. I've never actually met many of your team.
All right, so 6 out of 7 are here. Tim Martell will be here soon. So Andrew Dennington, Andrew Pfaff, Mr. Rooney, who I'm sure you know, and Jason Malinowski, and Judy Butts, who you can't see. So Judy, we can't see you in case you want us to. And then Claire is our recording secretary. There she is. There she is. Okay, nice to see a face. Hey, Judy. All right. So welcome, Sarah. All right. So Marty, is the professor coming, or are you going to handle this from beginning to end?
No, I will handle it with support from Sarah. The good professor is celebrating a birthday that his wife had made a plan for, so he could not come tonight. So I said we'd get it covered for him.
Good reason not to be here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's just, do you want to start, and do you want to tell us what you want us to know? Do you want us to start with questions? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, I think what's best for you, I know you've participated in the Board of Selectmen hearing. You know that they had approved this subject to some of the changes that we would make. So I can either do that foundational setting on what this is, what the intent of this is. Did the committee get a chance to review the PowerPoint slides and or the FAQ that we had shared?
Yes.
So I see the head nodding.
So I believe that probably no one in this committee, they have. I have. I've also got, I know what the changes that the Board of Selectmen would like to see before town meeting are. So I've got that on my list too. So we do want to talk about that before this is done. But why don't you just take it from here? Start big picture as far as why are you proposing this? You know, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And then we'll get into some of the details.
Yeah, perfect. So I have 2 monitors. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm reading some notes that I've prepared. So the lighting bylaw, look, why we're doing it. So there are 2 reasons primarily. One is to modernize the bylaw with the current standards to offer flexibility to lighting plan designers, encourage use of focused light where needed, and reduce light pollution. So it incorporates dark skies initiatives, which is a really national initiative to try and cut down on light pollution, which is really harmful to humans as well as other habitats. And we are finding that our language was very dated. So we use things like foot candles, and right now we use luminaires, and the standard for lighting and lighting plans have really changed and modernized, much like everything else around us. So we felt that was really an important part of this bylaw. And the second piece of it is a kind of an LED component or a lighting component specific to the blue light, which is putting a temperature gauge around the lighting so that we are looking to reduce that harmful blue light and make sure that our environment in Southborough is conducive to people and it's a healthy, safe environment. So that's really why we attempted to rewrite the bylaw. And I think what's important is that this is not starting from scratch. So we're not the only town to do this. In the deck, unfortunately, I've learned that we're not going to be able to share a presentation deck at town meeting. So I'll try and highlight some points so maybe people can utilize this as a little foundational understanding for what this is. But many Massachusetts towns have already done this and adopted the dark skies initiatives, really updated standards and attempted to be a little bit more forward thinking for lighting plans and illuminations in their towns. And those include towns like there's the 8 that I have that I've incorporated that are very similar in the structure and the illumination bylaw language is Abington, Arlington, Boxborough, Concord, Hopkinton, Lincoln, West Pisbury, and Winchester. And then subsequently, additional towns, and these are people who have changed the dark skies bylaw. They've also included the color temperature, so the LED component to reduce the blue light specific. So they've increased the standards and modernized the standards, and they've added this blue light LED language. And that includes Acton, Cambridge, Chelmsford, Nantucket, Rockport, and in process is Pepperell and Williamstown. So we're seeing this take shape all over the state, and there is some Massachusetts state legislation in both the House and the Senate that is looking for all towns to really adopt the dark skies. So the nice thing is we're not trailblazing. We're not the first to do it. We're following in other towns' footsteps, and we're taking the best language from those towns and really taking that language to make it right for Southborough and maximize its effectiveness for our town and what our size and scope is.
Is the bills that are pending in the House and Senate expected to pass?
They are, but I have not seen any update on that. And Destin really probably is the person that can provide that context, but they are still in process. And I think with COVID, things got a little shuffled. So we would expect them to see the light of day sometime in 21 or early 22.
And is what you're proposing with the replacement bylaw going to be consistent with those laws so that we this fits in with that, or is it going to be something that is going to make us do more than what this does or less?
No, I think fortunately we've thought about that, and having Destin, Dr. Heilman as part of the team, he's really on the forefront of that thinking. And so it really is about the Dark Skies Initiative, which is an international initiative. And so the House and the bill have basically offered up this very similar language. So we are staying right within line of that. So it would not require another town meeting or another bylaw change or vote.
So is the House and Senate using him as a consultant for their work?
I do not believe they are, but no, Sarah's shaking her head. No, they're not.
Okay. All right.
So supplemental to this information, I think what's important is just what is this going to do and how does this impact the town of Southborough? So once existing light reaches the end of its life or it is broken, so it's the request is that people who own homes, who own businesses, or who own property here and do not live here, that they will update their technology associated with the blue lights in their lighting in compliance with this bylaw when at least in a large industrial park or municipal building, 50% or more of those lights are needing replacement or are broken or damaged or require replacement anyway. Or if they are, I just completely lost my brain on what I was going to say. Sorry.
So why don't you separate businesses from residential? Let's talk about residential.
I don't know even where I was going. Yeah, sure.
Don't worry. Okay, so as just a normal homeowner, what would this bylaw require a homeowner to do going forward?
I think for now, it's not change, not for now. The bylaw doesn't change anything for a homeowner from today's bylaws that are covering single and double family residences and businesses to tomorrow, if this gets voted in by town. Nothing changes in the sense that the request is that when they do have light fixtures that either reach their term that they need to replace, they've been vandalized and they need to be replaced, or they're broken, that they would replace the fixture in compliance with the bylaw, and they would fix the light bulb to be in compliance with a Kelvin rating of being 3000 Kelvin or lower. So reducing the choice of light from the white light to the blue light.
Okay, so it's more than just replacing the bulb. Again, stay with houses for a moment. So you're talking about outside lighting, not inside lighting, outside lighting on your garage, your pole, whatever. So it also affects the actual fixture itself.
So the fixture itself is part of today's bylaw. So if the fixture itself is not in compliance with today's bylaw, so if it's not shielded, if you can see the light bulb, that's something that's not allowed today. So what would really be required for the homeowner is to look at their light and say, okay, is my light shielded? And if I can see my light bulb, then that is not in compliance with today's bylaw.
So they should be fixing that right now.
Well, ideally, yes. I think what we're looking for is now with Dark Skies Initiatives, if we can educate people that even if they can change their light bulb in that fixture and change it from a bright white light to a blue light, I think the reality is that unless no one's going to complain about somebody's home fixture unless it's a spotlight or a wall pack and it's shining on someone else's property. A wall pack is actually not allowed in our bylaw. Unshaded fixtures are not allowed in our bylaw.
Current
bylaw. So nothing has changed around the fixtures themselves. So I don't know if that helps, but I think that is the misnomer, is that we're changing all the fixture requirements and that people need to go out and immediately change what's attached to their home. And that's not the case at all. What we do provide is examples of how it's helpful to shield your light. In our presentation, when you don't have a well-shielded light, it actually becomes more harmful or less safe because it blinds because of the glare that comes off of that non-shielded light that actually restricts people from seeing a trespasser or something. So if you shield the light properly, which is what is contained in today's bylaw, and will be contained in tomorrow's bylaw because we're not changing that language. That's really what we're hoping people do, is just really change their light bulbs from a higher Kelvin rating to a blue light.
But they don't have to until it burns out.
Correct. And as I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting, LED lights could last like 10, 15 years.
Yeah. Because I've been trying to ask questions that I think you're going to get asked.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
All right, so now let's get to the rub of what Mr. Healy thinks is not included here, what I think is his biggest issue, which is he doesn't think the proposed bylaw says what you just said as far as being not having to go out the day after the bylaw is effective and change your light bulbs. So we really got to get to that and make sure that we either agree that he's wrong or if he's right, whether, because that's one of his three things he wants to have fixed before the time. He's given you a couple sentences that he'd like to see added that would make that clear. And it's my understanding that either Karina and or Sarah said at a planning board meeting they didn't understand those sentences. So we've got to get that straight before you leave tonight as far as that piece of it, because to me that is the most important thing you're going to have to answer. Do I have to go out and change my light bulb tomorrow?
So we have, so this is the working group. This has not been looked at the planning board, but if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen, which is the new applicability language that we've proposed. And we have, I just need shared screen. Okay, great, thanks.
And this newly proposed language has been submitted to town council for review, and we anticipate his feedback in advance of the planning board meeting on Monday.
Yes, you did share that. So this is to replace the applicability at the end of section B, which was Chairman Healy recommended the words unless and until. And so what we did is we drafted two separate paragraphs. The first is basically that existing luminaries, which are not in compliance with outdoor illumination as of its effective date, shall nevertheless be considered in compliance, provided they satisfy the current bylaw, unless or until the replacement of fixtures or luminaires. And the second paragraph suggests that fixtures or luminaires requiring replacement for any reason, including but not limited to end of life, breakdown, or vandalism, shall be replaced in compliance with this bylaw and comply with guidance outlined in the rules and regulations for outdoor illumination maintained by the planning board. So we believe that this now satisfies, yes, if you are in compliance with today's bylaw, you're still in compliance. But if you're not, you will still need, you nevertheless shall be considered in compliant. But when this bylaw comes into, you will be, asked to be in compliance for the new bylaw. So I don't know if any questions, and I know Chairman, oh yes, Mr. Rooney.
Marnie, I know you've been working on this a long time. I went back and looked at the history, and you should be commended on the length of time that you've been pushing this forward. I have a couple of concerns, and I suspect that they are similar to Mr. Healy's. One of the initial drafts, Marnie. Hold on one second. One of your initial drafts had language in it with regards to existing conditions. And as I understand it, at least in the draft that I have, Marnie, that was struck, or there were lines through that. And I'm trying to find exactly where I am talking about. And
So it's not the currently circulated.
Yeah, what it is you'll probably recognize the wording when I read it. It's the initial draft, and it's also a part of a few other towns, and it really deals with the issue of the grandfathering. It's the replacement of existing fixtures shall be subject to the provisions of this section. However, and it's the however language, which I think you and your committee might have the problem with. The replacement of existing non-conforming lamps or fixtures with the same or lower output non-conforming lamps or fixtures is exempted. One question I had, Marnie, it was in one of the drafts earlier, and then it was struck out or lined through. Was that as a result of discussions that you had, or do you remember why that was initially in there and is not presently in there?
As you said, it's a long road, and apparently I have COVID brain because I can't honestly remember that process.
Let me also ask you this. I looked at in Boxborough, and they say that any light fixture in existence on the day of the bylaw was exempt from these conditions. So, and I think that would be an easier pill to swallow for residents, that, their existing light fixtures are exempt. I don't know if that was considered or was not considered. And the other issue I had, Marnie, is that Wellesley has it says that section shall not apply to one family or two family dwellings. So as I read the Wellesley bylaw, it does not apply to single family residences. And I suspect that may have been as a result of some residential pushback. So long-winded questions are, have you considered these two issues? And is it something that there may be a willingness to either exempt the one or two families or grandfather in the existing conditions such that they don't have to go and change things when they have to be replaced?
So I guess it comes back to, I can answer those, and then I'd ask Sarah to chime in as well. So I think the first part goes back to the original question that was posed, is why are we updating the bylaw? And it really is a dark skies initiative. It's a health and safety and environmental protection. It's a good thing for humans to be cutting down their blue light. There's medical studies that show that there are some really deleterious effects to humans, to heart, to our sleeping, our ability to produce melatonin. And I think as these scientific studies continue to grow and we continue to use blue light, we're contributing to our own kind of implications of long-term associated with blue light exposure. So I think that's the first part of we went back to what is the objective of this bylaw? What are we really trying to do here? So that is why we proactively did strike the language that said you are exempt, because the feeling is that if we are going to do this as a world, that we all have a little part to play. And so we as the working committee feel very strongly about that, and that we would really like people to step up and make the choices that can help our own kids, our grandkids, the future generations, to not have these other implications. There's so many other things to worry about. Who the hell knew blue light was going to be bad for us, as we were all spending times on our screens? And I think we just want to be protective of that.
Yeah, and
John,
expected-
if I may.
I expected that, which was going to be your exact answer. Is there any possibility that single-family dwellings could be exempted from this? It sounds like from your working group and your position that has been vetted, and the overall science is dictating the larger application.
I'd have to say yes. That's exactly our
The
position.
other question I had was on enforcement. It refers you back to that part of the code where the building inspector is the enforcement officer, and you can be fined $300 a day until you have a hearing. And you're supposed to have a hearing within 21 days. So at least possibly then someone could incur a over $6,000 fine before they get a hearing. Was there any discussion about the enforcement procedure or lessening the penalty? And I bring that up, Marty, only because of the history of the zoning enforcement with Gulbenkians. I don't know if you recall that, but they had run up a day-to-day enforcement penalty in the thousands of dollars. And I just don't know whether or not your group has considered that type of a penalty and are good with it, or have any other ideas on the issue of enforcement.
So it raises a really good point. And I think that the decision between the planning board and Board of Selectmen was the process itself, and what happens on the enforcement. It sort of needs to be separated from the bylaw itself. So if we're willing to do the bylaw, then we as a town should be collaborating and talking about what is the enforcement process, and doing the town and the people who have to enforce the rules, making the right decisions there. So I think we all decided that the best thing to do is just, let's put it back to what the process is in place now, but let's revisit the process should the town agree that the lighting bylaw is the right way to go. And I think that we're into, we don't know enough about the process or what the town, the building inspector or the zoning board has to really think about when they're enforcing. So that was what was brought up by Board of Selectmen. And I think it was a agreed upon suggestion to just separate those two things for now. And if the lighting bylaw goes through, we will revisit, and we'd certainly want to collaborate with everybody, Board of Selectmen and the building inspector, to make sure that the right things are done.
And Marnie, is this a 2/3 vote?
Yes.
Yes, it
because
is.
it's zoning.
It
Yes,
is?
it is. Yes, it is.
Yes.
It is.
That's all thank you, Marnie. That's all the questions I have. And again, I can appreciate the amount of time you spent on this.
And did I answer all those questions? I'm thinking there was one I did not address, or did I get everything?
Yeah, I was concerned about the grandfathering, whether or not there'd be
Oh.
a willingness to exempt single-family residences and the enforcement. Those were my questions, and you responded to all of them, so thank you.
Thank you.
So Marnie, and the rest of advisory, we're just going to, as you have questions, just ask them. We're not going to go around. So as questions come up, ask them. So I just talked to Mr. Healy a few minutes ago, and he was under the impression that the planning board was going to have proposed regulations in place for enforcement by the town meeting. And I did say, well, this is May 5th, and it sounds like it's not much time for that. So it sounds like that's not the case.
No, I mean, I came away believing that that would be a collaborative process. The planning board should not be writing the enforcement rules for a different department. Like, that's just not something outside of our jurisdiction.
So if that's not done by town meeting, then you're basically asking the town or the people at town meeting to basically trust that they're not going to end up with a situation Mr. Rooney just described, running up $300 a day to they can get a hearing, that the enforcement regulations that would be forthcoming would be something that is reasonable, enforceable, et cetera. But they won't know that at the town meeting. They won't know that piece of that's going to be, they're just going to have a leap of faith that the regulations would be consistent with the purpose here, et cetera.
That's true for all zoning. It actually has to be approved by the state. So there's quite a bit of time that goes through when a town meeting agrees to a bylaw. It has to be reviewed by the state to make sure that it doesn't step over any kind of state law, or we're making anything, inaccurate for the town. So there's quite a bit of period, I'm going to say between 3 and 4 months, for us to work on that language and propose a process. I'm certainly willing to be part of the process as more probably as a resident who owns a property here, and also wearing a hat of the working group. But I just don't think I'm the person to write enforcement processes or regulation.
But we already have some enforcement rules, regulations, right? So those would be still applicable until new ones supersede them. So there
That's
is
correct.
already some. And if someone at town meeting says to you, well, wait a minute, most of the violations won't be seen until it's dark, right? And so someone starts calling when it's midnight, who are they going to call?
And I think that would come down to the process. I think there actually has to be, it would defer right now to the process that's in place. And the process in place is a complaint form that needs to be submitted into the building inspector. So that is it's a form that has to be completed. So it's not necessarily a call right now. Anyway, so I would just reinforce what today's process is, with the hope that by the time the state comes back and approves the language that we've voted on at town meeting, that there would be a new process in place, or a slightly tweaked process. I think it is important to make a note that there was a lighting, a residential light person had a complaint, and the building inspector did place on her response that this is outside of her jurisdiction. So for right now, that's what's, she's made the rules, and that's the rules. So this right now does not cover single and two family homes right now, based on her interpretation of the law. And right now, that's the only interpretation of the law right now. And so that's what's current, and what the precedent was set sometime, maybe May of last year.
And so I'm just repeating what Mr. Mooney said, but I want to make sure that this is clear. So your working group, including the professor, never considered exempting residences, 1 and 2 family residences. That from the very get-go, you thought everything should be covered?
Correct. Oh, Sarah, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I think that the reason why the working group determined that everything should be covered is because in the current applicability, everything is covered. The implication is to the luminaire itself, to the bulb. So the wattage is what triggers the applicability. It doesn't specify, what zone or where the location is of the actual bulb that has the wattage. which triggers the applicability. We also did have town council opine on the applicability, and he did recommend that it was applicable currently to single and two-family homes.
Kathy, if I could add something that, and Marnie, correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but the applicability is only for flood or spot luminaires. So they have to have a reflective component and be spotted onto something. And 2, it's only for 900 lumens. So like in my house, I have a light on my, by my front door with a 500 lumens, what looks like a 60 regular light bulb that would not be covered by this bylaw.
Because it's not 900.
Correct. So
And-
most
and-
residential lights that you would have on your light post or on your house are usually 60 watt or below, which with today's LEDs are usually 600 lumens or 500 lumens. So they would not be covered by this bylaw. Also, unless you have a spot or flood, which has a reflective component. So if you just have a light bulb on its own, or like a candelabra, 3 or 5 light bulbs sitting there without a reflective surface, those would not be covered.
Yeah, but Andrew, I assume, and I don't know it quantitatively, but a number of people, at least on mine, should have flood lights on the driveway. I mean, that
Yeah.
shine, right into the driveway. Those would certainly be within the purview of this bylaw.
Those floodlights for sure, but I think it exempts the security ones that turn on with motion. So as long as you don't have your floodlight on your neighbor's house all day, every night, which would be kind of obnoxious,
Right.
then you wouldn't be impacted. But I think the motion one is exempted, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not as versed as you guys.
No, you're obviously very well versed, Andrew, because that's
Yeah.
a good tip for me. Because I actually, Dustin had shared that with us, and it's just something that didn't resonate. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I went around my house and was kind of curious if I was in compliance, and I have a regular kind of lantern with a 500 lumen bulb in it that has no reflector, so it's not a flood or a spot, but it also is below the limit. And I have motion activated floodlights. So I kind of went around and said, okay, I'm not impacted by this because I'm already in compliance with today's. I'd be in compliance. The only exception is whether or not I have, 3,000 Kelvin, blue light or more yellow light bulbs, which I already have the yellow light already because I just think it looks better. So I'm good. And I think that's
Andrew,
probably
I
the
am
case
in
for a lot
I
of
am in
people
violation, Andrew.
in
But
terms of,
maybe they should hire you to do the.
No, hey, you know what?
So Marnie, I agree that I think you're going to the same place. What Andrew just said, I would include in your presentation because
Absolutely.
people aren't going to be sitting there worried about the businesses. They're going to be worried about their own homes. So if you really want to make a, convincing presentation, again, you got to have 2/3 on this. I would definitely, focus on what sounds like is going to be a minimal impact on residences.
So, Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So earlier tonight, Marnie, I think you said that if you can see the bulb, it's included in this. And that seems to be in contrast with what Andrew just said. So can we
Correct.
clear that up?
If it's greater than 900. So I think that's the point. So if you have, and I don't think any of those maybe they do, the wattage on those, if you have like Sarah, I don't remember what the conversion is, a 900 lumen is to wattage.
it's about a 60, but a lot of the
Yeah.
60 conversion
Yes.
LEDs are really 500.
Correct.
But I think it's also, Tim, and again, Marnie, is you could have a 200 watt light bulb hanging from your porch, but because it doesn't have a reflective surface, it's not considered a flood or a spot. So I think not many people have that kind of light, but if you had a post, especially on a street post, a lot of them have like a glass bulb with a bulb in it. So if you had a 120 watt bulb in there with no reflective, just the bulb, then it's not, by definition, it's not a flood or a spot.
Okay, and so even though it's not shielded,
Correct.
it's fine.
I believe that's my interpretation of the applicability. And as I've seen in other towns, they define a flood or a spot, which we don't have it defined, as any fixture or lamp that incorporates a reflector or a refractor to concentrate the light output into a directed beam in a particular direction, which
Perhaps that should be added to the definition section.
possibly.
That would be my ask.
Sounds like a good idea.
I will email it to Sarah.
Great insight, Andrew. Thank you.
Where's I like it, so I wanted to pass. I just think, this is the kind of stuff that you're gonna get on.
Hey,
Yeah,
Marty,
Marty, I do think you should be prepared at town meeting to discuss, if someone happens to bring it up, the exemptions for single family and some of the bylaws are surrounding us, and the whole issue of grandfathering, because I do think that that could be a raw nerve.
hey, Marty, as you look at especially residences around town, is there any sense of how many residences, like just rough percentage, don't actually conform to our existing bylaw? And then if the new bylaw was retroactive, how many wouldn't comply? Like, do you have any sense of, like, just even as you've driven around town, like, without obviously looking at someone's bulb and seeing what, lumens, et cetera, it's giving off? Any sense there?
I haven't. It's a good question. I like Mr. Rooney am not in compliance. So we had something installed a very long time ago. We don't use anymore, but it's on my house, so I need to take that down. So I think there are probably many people that may not be in compliance. I just don't have a sense. I haven't driven around.
Okay. And then I'm usually pretty good with numbers, but this whole scientific lumens thing is throwing me off. In terms of like uplighting, I'm thinking about how people illuminate flags in particular, which is technically
exempt.
required. Yeah, so that's all. But what about uplighting with a shield? Is that exempt, or is it then go to what type of bulb is in that uplight?
I think there are specific things like illuminating a flag that are allow a certain type of uplight, but the whole problem with an uplight is you're putting light
That's
into
what I figured,
into
yeah.
the dark sky.
Yeah.
So there are certain exemptions, and I had this up for me to read, and I cannot seem to find it on my.
I think I have it here, Marnie.
I was gonna say I do too.
It shall not apply to any luminaire intended solely to illuminate any freestanding sign, flag, or walls of any building, but such luminaire shall be shielded so that its direct light is confined to the surface of such sign, flag, or building.
So essentially, we don't want you to light the sky.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so if we were trying to summarize what's been said so far, is this right? If you are currently not in compliant with the current bylaw, you're still going to be non-compliant if this bylaw passes. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Okay. If you are compliant with the current bylaw, you don't have to do anything with the new bylaw until you've got the opportunity to, or you have to change a light bulb, something breaks, you've got to change it. So until you have to make a change to a non-compliant fixture and bulb, as long as you're compliant to begin with the old bylaw, there's nothing you have to do. Okay?
Correct. That's the
There's no-
language we've asked Aldo to opine on.
Yep.
Correct.
I think you've got to really hit home on that because that's important, and then go into some of the things that Andrew and Jesse, you may even do a cheat sheet, say it doesn't apply residences. This is what it doesn't apply to.
I had a few more questions, Kathy.
Well, that's what we're here for. Go ahead.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to go first?
Oh, it's something quick to add to that is with the current bylaw, you need to fix it today. So this is kind of giving people a period or time to fix things that they should have already fixed already.
Now, why is that true? Because what I just said is if you're not compliant today, this doesn't help you.
But if you're not compliant today, you should be fixing it today. When the new bylaw passes, you have a period until that light breaks. Today, you should be, there is nothing having to do with once the light breaks, then replace it.
If you go back to the language she showed us to begin with, I don't think that's what it says. So let's get this clear, because that's not what I said. So you're saying something different. So if I'm not compliant today, the new bylaw passes.
No, just today. No new bylaw. Just today's bylaw.
Right, so I
Okay.
agree, you should change it right now, right? You've got a problem right now that should be
Correct.
fixed, right? Now, the new bylaw, so you still have this problem, you didn't fix it, new bylaw gets passed, right? You still have to fix it right away, right?
No,
Because
you're
now
not
the new
protected.
bylaw is you only have to fix it once it breaks.
Correct.
So there's a benefit there.
Okay, so even if you weren't, because that's not what I said, so even if you weren't compliant before with a new bylaw, then you still get, for lack of a better term, grandfathered until you actually are ready to replace whatever it is that's not compliant.
Can I ask a question? Kathy?
Yes, of course.
So the, Marnie, the Word document you showed at the beginning about, is that about the grandfathering where it adds the sentence or two that clarifies it? Is that something where you're
Yes.
yes, that. Would this be an amendment? You would introduce it? Okay. And
Yes.
you would sponsor it with the Board of Selectmen or?
Yeah,
Whoever.
so I'm assuming that Aldo approves this language, so this is in his hands now. I'll make an amendment on the floor to update the applicability, and I think then based on Tim's suggestion, we'll review the definitions and make sure if we need to amend the definition section, I would be making that amendment as well.
Okay, this is not what this says, Andrew Pfaff. Look what it says. It says, third sentence. It's saying that as long as they satisfy the current bylaw, they don't have to do anything. It doesn't say, period, that they don't have to replace it. It says, as long as they satisfy the current bylaw.
This is in the new bylaw.
This
Yeah,
is what they're proposing to change, to try to satisfy the Board of Selectmen's concern. As far as it not stating explicitly that no one's got to go out tomorrow and change light bulbs.
Yeah, I'm just talking about, imagine there is no new bylaw. We
Yep.
just have our current one on the books.
Yep.
There's no grandfathering in that. They have to be fixed. Once it's brought to your attention, they need to be fixed, right?
Yep.
This is a benefit that this bylaw brings, that you're now, what was not in compliance before, that needed to be fixed immediately, now is grandfathered in and is no longer, I guess, out of compliance, sort of.
And it's what I don't agree with. Go back to the language. That's not what that says.
I don't read it like
says-
that, Andrew.
You're reading like Andrew?
I do not read it the way Andrew does.
I'm not either. It says you've got to already be in compliance with the current bylaw before your grandfather. So go back to the language. It says 4/11/2005.
Yeah, I would agree that with you, Kathy, that we're saying as of its effective date shall nevertheless be considered in compliance provided that they did satisfy the prior bylaw, unless or until the replacement of fixtures or luminaires.
So it doesn't make it worse, but it doesn't help people who are out of
Gotcha.
compliance is all I'm trying to say.
I guess the point of this is maybe the clarifying language could also be clarified. And I'm sure that's something that you and Aldo and everyone will work out. But I mean, everyone is on the same page about what it should express. That
These are hard bylaws to deal with at town meeting, right? These are complicated. Look what's all in it.
Absolutely.
And if someone's seen it for the first time when they show up on Saturday, it's really going to be hard to grasp. That's why I'm trying to boil this down to something that people can actually understand.
Marnie, would you expect that most of these issues would be brought up in the context of neighbor versus neighbor in terms of enforcement? I don't think the building inspector is going to be driving around looking, but do you think that would be the most, the largest implementation of this bylaw?
Yeah, and I think that's actually how the current building inspector was trying to enforce the last one, is just to say, hey, just talk to your neighbor. But I think that was like one complaint, and I don't have actually statistics on this, and maybe I should, but I don't think there's a lot of lighting trespass complaints in the town of Southborough. But yeah, I think she would probably, and I think that could be the process that, there's like a multi-step process, have a conversation with your neighbor, and we can certainly have that collaboration for what does it look like from an enforcement perspective.
And we don't anticipate, if this passes, that it would increase the number of complaints. In my tenure, in my almost 2 years here, I've only seen the one complaint, and Karina is about a couple years out from me. So in her 4 years, she's only seen one complaint. And we don't anticipate a flood of complaints should this bylaw pass.
Okay, so just
So
to be clear, the language that we saw before, Aldo is reviewing that right now, and if he approves, you're going to amend the proposed bylaw at town meeting to include that language? Is that a
That's
fact?
correct, yes.
Because that's definitely one issue that needs to be resolved. Okay.
And we'll discuss that at our planning board meeting, the public hearing on Monday. So he did ensure us that he'd have that back. So we'd have that conversation Monday.
Okay. Tim?
Yes. Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed it. Did the issue with the rec fields get addressed?
No, but we're going to.
Okay, that's one of the areas I'd like to talk. Another area, I don't really understand the part about light trespass. It seems vague and that concerns me. I live on a hill. Any light I have is going to trespass on those around me. It's inevitable, even if I shield it. And I don't know what it means in this bylaw. So I think it either needs to be detailed or removed. I was looking at the Linwood bylaw and they have some other things where they've excluded. I'm just going to list them out. Moving cars. So if you're leaving your driveway and your lights flash on your neighbor, can they complain? Temporary events like summer nights, what's the impact on them? Are they going to have to get a waiver? Are they shut down? Have you considered that? I noticed you have an exemption for hazard lights. I don't know if that includes navigation lights, things that are put on towers, etc. And then the other one I wanted to bring up that Linwood brought up is there are sometimes fire codes from the National Fire Protection Association that you might not be in compliance with their laws. Have you considered all of those corner cases?
So I guess we can start from this top. Sarah, I know you have to go moderate the master planning committee. I don't know if you want to share the good news on Choate.
I'll share the good news and then I'll leave on a high note. I did reach out to Musco, who oversaw the implementation of the field lighting at Choate. It is in compliance with the bylaw as written, should it pass, and would remain in compliance for the 25 years that it is currently contracted for replacement. So, and it actually, just anecdotally, is lower than the threshold that is set out for sports field lighting moving forward.
That is good news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you
Sarah.
very much
Thanks
for
for joining me. So first of all, trespass. So that is a standard term used in lighting. The planning board in lighting plans. Trespass is basically anything that's over your property line. Unless you abut like a public street, it can fall out and you can have light spillage into a public street. But generally, if your lights are shining outside of your perimeter of your property bounds, that is called light trespass.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be simple. I certainly don't mean to be sarcastic, but I can see the lights from Boston. They're shining into my house. It seems very undefined. I don't know what it means, and I don't think people should be bothered by their neighbors over undefined terms, particularly if there's a $300 a day fee.
So is it that there's no trespassing at all allowed onto another's property? Is that?
So that's our current planning bylaw. Like you're not allowed to there's zero light trespass on the current site plans when we review site plans. So people who build homes and or developments, and they have to actually show lighting plans, and that light plan provides. And so what this new bylaw allows the people who are putting light on properties, whether they're single home, 2-family homes, or large build outs, they now have kind of a master total of luminaires that they can use on their property. And then they can kind of use that within range. So it doesn't now have to have specific standards that we applied back in the 80s and 90s. So it gives that latitude for people building and setting up light plans. What it simply means is that if you have a floodlight, a floodlight should not be facing, Tim, your neighborhood. So you should not have a floodlight that is shining into your neighbor's house. It should be facing your property. So if it's up and facing your neighbor's house, that would be considered light trespass if, you know, if they open their blinds and they have light shadows on their own walls. You know, I have light trespass from those street lights that come into my house at night. So I understand the challenge of definition, but it's a very standard term, and it's used in pretty much every outdoor illumination bylaw that exists.
So if there's no light trespass, are we going to have to move the street pole from your house?
No, I don't understand your question.
Well, you
Streetlights are
said
exempt. Streetlights are exempt,
Oh,
correct?
okay, all right. Are they?
I thought they were, maybe they're not. She's not
It's a
saying.
very simple statement that says there shall be no light trespass by a luminaire. It's very general. It doesn't seem to have exempted anything.
So streetlights are basically light emitted by the fixture shall have a correlated color temperature no greater than 3000 Kelvin. And we have we've negotiated that with our lighting supply.
Right, so
So-
I'm specifically looking at item R.
Can I jump in here quick and say something that I think that because I'm looking at R2,
Can you just share your screen, Andrew or Tim?
I don't think Jason will allow that.
but that's part of the existing bylaw, right? There's no change to that. The text which is shown, which is just normal print, it's not stricken through or
Here, we can check.
bolded, we have that. I'm gonna check right now.
So perhaps as part of this change, it should be addressed to make it more clear.
Thank you, Marnie.
Yeah, so in this bylaw, everything that's get kind of pink is some of the new standards. And so the R is not, that's from the existing
Got it.
bylaw.
No, that was helpful. And thank you, Andrew. That was helpful. I would ask you as part of this, maybe you can talk about it and fix that part of the old bylaw that seems to be a little too generic. And I'll stop harassing you, Marnie.
No, so I'll be very honest with you, Tim. We won't probably attack that right now. It's so tight. The town meeting is right around the corner. And I think if we try to tackle a definition, that opens up a new kind of can of worms, or trying to figure out something that has been in the language for years and years. I think we would prefer to just not touch that. But I can appreciate if it affects the way that you would review the bylaw and vote on it.
It has no impact on what you're trying to do. Because as Andrew pointed out, it is what it is at today. So thank you for that, Andrew.
Hey, Kathy, I just wanted to make sure you saw the note in the chat, because I think we need to announce it, giving.
I did. I'm going to address that in just a sec.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. So a question has been asked by Marcy Jones. That is, she's basically saying, this is what she says: providing exemption for something like Choate Field and not including, and not individual existing homeowners should be reconsidered. So Ms. Jones, that's not what's happening here. Choate's not being exempt. The research has been done because Marty Healy of the Board of Selectmen was very concerned about Choate, is that the current Choate lights are already in compliance with the new bylaw. So it's not that they're being exempted, they're okay to begin with. Anybody disagree with that as far as what Sarah just said?
No, that's what Sarah said.
So Ms. Jones, if that doesn't satisfy you, send another chat. Okay, is everybody satisfied at least with the potential residential impact here, so we can move on to more? Go ahead, John.
I just have one more question, Marnie. I don't know if you can answer this or if it's an Aldo question. Could an amendment be made from the floor to exempt residential, 1 family and 2 family?
Yeah, I wouldn't see why it couldn't be. So
I think that's something you should be prepared for. And in terms of the basis upon which you are including them is based upon the science. So I would have at least some talking points with regards to that issue.
I think that's highly likely too, John.
And can I just ask I guess a question to the committee before you make a vote? What am I missing? Like, I don't understand why people wouldn't want to do this. Is there something that I just can't, is it
Yeah.
I'm not sure that-
environmentally? Yeah,
I'm
okay.
not sure that that's the case, Marty. We're just trying to make sure we understand it and, be ready for, our job is to basically help town meeting understand this, right? And really vet it as much as we can so that we can make a recommendation. I don't know that you should conclude from these questions that there's not support of this. We just want to make sure we understand it before we do it. So
Philosophically, Marty, not generally in favor of bylaws that enable neighbors to use the town in a neighbor-on-neighbor dispute. That's just philosophically from where I come. I think it has, and also I think it has a better chance of passing if there's either a grandfather to existing conditions or single-family residences are accepted. That's kind of my thought process, Marty. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, and I guess my one question would be, but a development of single family houses has to comply. So like, I don't know how you would do that if you have a developer who's developing a 8 lots. They would need to comply for this. But you're saying that even a developer coming in, then the lighting would not be. So that's where like the challenge is for us is.
Yeah. I didn't think of the developer scenario. So you're saying that if a developer came in and developed 8, 10 single-family residences, that I'll have to fall within the bylaw. Would that be true if single-family residences were exempted?
That's what I wouldn't know how to interpret that actually as a planning board member.
Right. And
So, John,
Yes.
I think the materials that the FAQ that was circulated said that the current bylaw does already apply to.
They do already apply.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's just that the building inspector has chosen not to interpret it that way and not to actually enforce it. And, another point that I think Sarah mentioned that's relevant is just the relatively low number of complaints. The fact that the bylaw, I assume that's going to include complaints. People complained to the building inspector about a residence, and then the building inspector said, I'm not going to do anything with it because, so, there's probably going to be some reasonableness to this and how the building inspector interprets.
But think about what we just said. If we're talking about something brand new where the builders tend to know what the rules are, right? They should know. They know up front what they are. I don't know there'd be a lot of pushback on using, the right kind of light bulb versus the wrong kind. Most people today are starting to use the right kind of light bulbs, right? When you get a new one, a lot of people are using LEDs or whatever. So I don't know there'd be a big issue with a new house as far as just doing it correctly from the very get-go. I think the pushback is making a change. So I think that's the audience that you got to really address more than new construction as far as what they would do.
Thank you. Very helpful conversation. I really appreciate the feedback.
Okay, so let's turn to the commercial application for the next few minutes. And let's explain why choate has been brought up. So Mr. Healy was extremely concerned about choate, and that's why Sarah went back and did the research she did to see whether it would comply or not. He was concerned that choate, which of course has a troubled history, as we remember, if it didn't comply, then not only would you have to change light bulbs at some point when they burnt out, but you might have to change the whole structure. There'd be a lot that would have to be changed. So that's what his concern was. We'd have to start from scratch as far as spending, the $400,000 we spent a couple of years ago. You have to spend the whole again, start all over. The warranty wouldn't apply that we have right now, et cetera. So that's why Sarah did what she did. This wasn't just an out of the blue comment about choate. And then we talked about, is there any other choates around town? And we don't think so. The new lighting projects are coming. We know about those, but when you think about it, Southborough doesn't have a whole lot of
Hey, Kathy,
lights. Go ahead, Tim.
what about the tennis courts at Neary?
The new ones.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. So hold that thought, Tim. We're going to talk about the applicability
sorry.
to the new lighting projects. But as far as old existing projects today, we couldn't think of anything else besides choate that you might be concerned about that would, could be very costly if it had to make a big change once something happened to force a change. Can anyone
Kathy,
else?
doesn't St. Mark's have a couple of fields they light as well?
We didn't think so.
We don't think so?
There's a proposal to do that, and then it didn't go forward, right?
Okay.
So I walked around town a few months ago just to walk around town, and it was so dark. The public safety building, and Jason and I have talked about this, it's pretty dark too when you get close to the building. So it's not brightly lit. That's the other one we thought about. Does this public safety building have any lights that might be a problem? So that's why Choate was picked on. Now let's talk about the two new lighting projects, the tennis courts and Mooney Field. So Marnie, it's my understanding that the Rec Commission has looked at this, has shown the new proposed bylaw to whomever they're dealing with as far as the engineering, and that they have been assured that their engineering plans conform with the new bylaw.
That is correct. They did. We worked very collaboratively with Musco Lighting, pretty much does all the big lighting, and they've done the Choate Field. They'll do the tennis courts, and they'll do the other one that you just said.
Did they put that in writing? Is it in writing that it?
Yes, so it's part of their plan. It's part of their site plan. So they actually wrote their entire lighting following the Dark Skies Initiative and the sports field IES regulations. And so that was a really great collaborative partnership. So they're all in compliance.
So now why do lights like that, so let's stick with Mooney Field for a second. Well, no, but Neary too. Remember the big pushback on those lights was neighbors who were concerned about lights, especially after 9 o'clock at night when people were trying to go to bed, lighting up their house. Even if they're compliant, don't those lights still light up people's houses and yards?
They do, but I think the way that they're designed now, when you see the light projection on the site plans, they're really focused just on the plan, unlike the lights of yesteryear, which had a lot of glare. So it would just go spill all over. It really is directed onto the platform of where they need illumination. And so that's really what Musco has designed and has gone by schools, the IES, which are kind of sports recreation standards. So, you know, I think what the original Mooney plan was to light it to look like almost like a college level field. And so what our lights plan says, we don't need college level field lighting. We need, you know, elementary school and middle school level lighting. And so it changes the regulations associated with the number of people that you expect, that how much light needs to be there and how much is safe for the players on the field. So all of those regulations have been vetted by the sports industry, have been vetted by the lighting industry, and Musco, who is the people who will be doing all the engineering and imparting that, really worked so closely with us in recreation to make sure those happened.
Tim, are you satisfied?
Yep.
Was that
Heather,
easy?
can I come?
Yep.
Go
Can I
ahead.
come back to a comment
Okay.
you made? So you made a comment about the darkness of the public safety building. The reason I asked the uplight question was actually about that building, because if anyone's noticed, they did add some lights to that building after the incident that occurred about a year ago for that exact reason. I just want to make sure that, you know, I searched the language in this article multiple times. It says public safety. I know it's not mentioning the building itself, but it also talks about safety and security of a property, that those lights probably aren't in conformity with what we're proposing here, but someone's interpretation of it, if it relates to the safety of a building, particularly a public safety building, that would be exempted. And I also think about other municipal buildings in general, because we're talking about commercial, but I think about that, you know, in this light.
I think the one important point, sorry.
No, go
I was
ahead.
gonna
Brian. Go
say,
ahead.
Jason, is that the light that's illuminating the building?
Well,
Like
there's
the
multiple.
sign?
There's multiple at the base of the building.
Yeah, but it's going up against the building?
Yeah, everything points towards the building.
Yeah, so that would be covered under the, I think, under the direct light that is confined to a building. So uplighting, the same as a flag or a sign. It's like if you have landscape lighting and you're illuminating your house. I think that's how I read it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to actually pull to as well.
Okay.
And I also think it's important to know that, like, the planning board, and again, not on specific things, like on site plans, they have the ability to put a waiver in place if it needed to happen. So that is within the rights of the planning board on illumination. So something be so compelling that they can waive those rights.
So Jason, I haven't been there since we stopped meeting, so good. I'm glad they got a few lights because it really was dark. So Marnie, if you build a glass building in Southborough, and it's got lots and lots of lights outside that spill all over the place, that's not included here, correct?
What do you mean? That'll be part of if you're building a major, is this not a single family home? This is a developer building a building?
Yeah.
They'd have to comply with whatever the lighting bylaw is right now. And right now, if there's light trespass or spillage based on a light plan, that wouldn't be allowed today.
Okay.
Although this is outdoor, right?
I'm talking indoor, so we've got one.
Oh, indoor, it doesn't affect.
It definitely, okay, so I'm talking indoor, but it's a glass building, so it's a lot of light coming out this building right now. So, all right, so that
I know what you're talking about, but
Yep,
I don't
it's very
think
pretty.
this
It's
applies.
pretty, but it's a lot of light, and it's all over the road. Okay.
This is an outdoor illumination bylaw.
Okay, so the three things now, I don't know what advisory is going to do. We're not the board of selectmen, but the three things that board of selectmen wanted to, or at least one of them, and I think maybe two of them wanted to see changed before the final vote takes place at town meeting. We've talked about them. The choke question got answered. There is concern about the enforcement, especially, if the enforcement needs to take place at night, someone's got to come see something at night. There's really no one that works at night to go do this. So that's concerned. And they did think that the regulations were going to be done before town meeting. So you probably ought to call the board of selectmen and let them know that's not the case. One of them was listening, but he's not anymore. So just make sure they know that. And then this language that you proposed, hopefully will satisfy that concern as far as making it clear that everybody doesn't have to run out and change their light bulbs the day after the bylaw is effective. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, John.
The only other thing, and it's a subset of the first item you mentioned, Kathy and Marnie, that is, again, to be aware of the Gulbenkian issue that arose in the past. I was charged with the responsibility of resolving that. And there were daily fines associated with being in violation, and they quickly accumulate. And in the existing enforcement provision in our code, you can be fined $300 a day, and each day is a separate incident. So I don't know if there's a mechanism to address that or how to address that, but I would absolutely be prepared to address that at town meeting.
Thank you.
Well, John, just one, I understand there's kind of an unfairness to that, but it's probably cheaper to replace the light bulb fast.
Yeah, but Andrew, there's a lot of individuals who I've come across. It's a matter of principle that I hear you. It'd certainly be much cheaper to replace the fixture, but the fines accumulate in an expedited fashion. And I just think you should be prepared to address it, Marnie, because I do think it would come up.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. I've taken a lot of notes tonight. Really helpful feedback, conversation.
Marnie, if you want to run by what you end up with as far as what you're going to say before town meeting, I'm sure anyone's here would be glad to review it and give you some comments on it.
Thank you.
Just to make sure that, if we put ourselves in the average town meeting seat, they may not know anything. They may not know what dark skies is. They may not know what blue light is. So, this is a challenge.
No doubt, and no ability to actually put it on a presentation slide, right? To
No,
speak it all.
That's
So
unfortunate. Yep,
yeah.
that's unfortunate. So yep, you're going to be up there winging it with handouts. All right. Okay. So anyone else have any questions for Marnie before we go on?
I'm sure you'll
So
be.
we are going to vote on this tonight, I believe, Marty, so I'll let you know. You don't have to stay. We're going to talk about the other two zoning articles, and then we're going to try to vote on all three of them.
Perfect. I'll probably stay. I won't be able to comment on them, but I'll probably just stay to listen.
Do you want to vote now, Kathy?
What's everybody's pleasure? You want to vote on this one now, since it's fresh?
Sure.
Anybody not ready to vote? Let me ask it that way. So no one said that. All right, so let's vote. So Andrew Pfaff, you want to make the motion, and maybe Jason second.
What number is this one?
35.
I move that the advisory committee support at town meeting article number 35 for the outdoor illumination bylaw.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I kind of wanted to see the definition included.
The definition of
Spotlight.
spotlight.
Okay. Yeah, I did email that to Sarah. You think that would be possible to add, Marnie?
Yeah, I can amend that on the floor.
Okay. I amend my motion to include the definition that we stated during the meeting for the flood and spotlight.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, second to the.
But don't we have to vote on the language that's in the warrant, and then when
Yes.
Marnie makes
We
the
need
motion
to
on
either
town meeting
support or
floor,
support what's in this warrant, right? First, and then when it gets amended, then we huddle real quick and see whether we support the amendment. We'll talk about it ahead of time because it sounds like it's going to happen, so we'll know what we're going to do. But we definitely should, in case it doesn't happen, vote on it as is in the warrant. Then we can discuss. We do a second vote that if it gets amended at town meeting, do we continue to either support or not support the amendment? That'd be I think the better way to do it, so we don't have to scurry around at town meeting to figure out. It's obvious what I think we think, so let's just go ahead and get it settled tonight, okay?
Do we just want to do a straw poll with
Let's
that
do a straw
language in there?
poll.
So, all right, so we can do straw poll, but let's at least vote on the bylaw as written in the warrant. So we've made a vote so that when Paul Semino turns to us and said which position, we say we support or not support.
So what are we
As
voting
written.
on? What are we voting on? The language that's in the warrant prior to the revisions?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
So we may, I mean, if you don't support it because you want the revisions to be in there, that's fine. And then, we will vote again once the revisions are officially in there.
Okay, so-
All right, so we've got the original motion.
But the only concern I have, Kathy, is that if it's, Marnie will then have, potentially would have a negative vote from advisory. Would it be better for us just to wait to have the whole vote at town meeting rather than a no now? I don't know. That's my
You
only.
can do that. It's written, so Marty, in the warrant right now, it says at town meeting because we really wanted to get this one settled. So it says that, so we can just keep it that way. And maybe at least give her an idea tonight of where we stand so she knows where it looks like we're going here. So it sounds to me, Marnie, like you've got support here as long as you make the spotlight definition change and you add the language that you showed us that clarifies that it will not be applicable to people until they're ready, until they have to actually make a change, if they're already in compliance.
We just take a straw poll for that and then worry about it at town meeting.
Yeah. So is anyone opposed to that so John's opposed to even with those amendments, John? Okay, you're muted.
The amendments are, again, the significant questions I have are the exemption for single-family homes, which I understand the science does not support that type of a difference.
But that may happen at town meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
And the enforcement mechanism. Those are the bases upon which I'm not comfortable with the language in the warrant.
Okay, and the enforcement, it looks like the enforcement language, we're not going to have that. That's going to come later, no matter what gets said at town meeting. Okay, so there's one not supporting. Anybody else not support the bylaw as written with the two amendments we talked about, definition of spotlight and making it clear that it doesn't apply until you need to change your bulb or fixture if you're already in compliance? All right, so Marty, it looks like in the end, based on what you just saw, you're probably going to have the support of at least a majority of advisory as long as those two things happen.
Thank you. Thanks. I really appreciate that support and understand the concerns that have been addressed as well. I know it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think it is, just because it's difficult, people will gloss over when they look at it to begin with. And then they're going to be afraid that they've got to go out and change their light bulbs tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All right, so as always, thank you. Andrew, go ahead.
I think there was a motion made and seconded, right?
Yeah, so I
Withdraw the
withdrew
motion.
both of my motions.
Sorry, I don't do these things right sometimes. So Claire, did you hear that? Both motions, the amended motion and the original motion, have been withdrawn.
Thank you.
Now we're doing it right, AD?
Okay, I mean, I was
Right.
prepared to vote on it now, but
Well, you still sound skeptical. Have we done something wrong?
no, I just think that it's good to bring these discussions to a conclusion. I trust that they're gonna bring the amendment. Marnie said they're gonna do it,
Yeah.
so.
But we can't vote on it because it's not in the warrant. So the
Okay.
problem is if we had to vote on, I'd rather not have it say not support, but if you make these changes, then we'll support. I'd rather just,
It looked like it would pass even
kind of
without
disagree
the,
with it. I see no reason not to take a vote saying that we support Article 35 with the following two amendments, and then we're done. And then if that doesn't happen at town meeting and policy meeting turns to us and says, what's advisory's position? We say not support, or we take another vote real quick to see whether we still will support it with whatever amendments are proposed there. So I see no reason not to take a vote on that. It's not being printed in the warrant. The warrant's done. It's printed. I've got it sitting in front of me.
Yeah, my only caution to Marnie, and apparently it's not being realized, is I thought that there may be one or two others who saw the issue the way I did, and I didn't want her to have to deal with those negative votes if she didn't have to until town meeting.
So John, I don't
Does that make sense?
know what we
Kathy?
can do about the enforcement at this point. That's going to come with rules and regulations later. And she said, we've got that. We're going to do it. We just can't do it now. It's going to take a few months to get done. They've answered the question on Choate. That was another question. And my concern was, again, the ability to make it clear when someone had to make a change. And I think they've done that. So I'm okay with this. I don't know what anybody else's specific concerns are. We've all had some concerns tonight, so I'm not sure what anybody else thinks at this point. So we
okay,
could vote.
if we're gonna vote, let's vote. I think move it to a vote or. let's
I'm sorry, I don't know what we're, other than the article as written in the warrant, I don't know what we're voting on. We don't have anything in front of us.
We don't have it in front of us,
Oh.
but go ahead.
okay. On the enforcement and the grandfathered, the way I read this language is the existing structures are grandfathered. Why else would you say the replacement of fixtures or luminaires shall be subject to the provisions of this section and comply with this guidance, etc.? If it didn't mean that having the existing ones wasn't subject to it. And the enforcement, the language about the enforcement, that doesn't add anything to me. It's just the existing outdoor illumination bylaw is already, someone could make a complaint to the building inspector. So this is just a long-winded to say, I think just for sake of simplicity, I would like to bring back the motion. I move that the advisory committee support at town meeting Article 35.
Second. I'll second that. Further discussion? So Andrew, I always hate to debate attorneys because you guys know how to read the law, but I think it's clear as it can be as far as what that language says. It says that you've got to be in compliant with the current bylaw if they're going to grandfather you.
I agree, Kathy. Again, we would beat this horse down pretty badly. I think Marnie, you're gonna get overwhelming support.
I mean, advisory members have the right to stand up at town meeting and, give a dissenting vote too and dissent. So that's always an opportunity to speak to the audience as far as what your vote was. It's unfortunate that we don't have the screen that shows advisory vote, because when we did that for the first time 2 years ago, we actually did have people from the audience that wanted to know why we voted 5-2 or 4-3, whatever it was, and it was pretty healthy. I was glad they saw it. I'm glad they asked about it. We don't have that when we're outdoors. So, people are barely going to hear what Paul Semino says as far as what we think. So anyway, anybody from advisory can always stand up and say, I disagree with my fellow committee members, and this is why I disagree. So you've always got that opportunity. We can always take another vote at town meeting if we think that something has changed based on what we voted on. So this is not locked in.
Okay, so motion's been made and seconded. Are we going to vote on article as written in the warrant?
Okay, and we've discussed it. So roll call vote. Judy? Judy, you are muted.
I said I was hoping you'd start with somebody else. This is an issue so remote from anything that I'm committed to. So I don't have much, I think I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Cook, yay. Jason?
No, but I look forward to a future motion on this to support it.
Okay. AD?
Aye.
Okay. AP?
Nay, I agree with Jason.
Okay. Tim?
I have to agree with Jason. Nay,
And Mr. Mooney?
but I want to vote for it.
Nay, and this is what I was afraid was going to happen, is that, she's going to leave here with overwhelming negative votes, when the reality is, if things happen as she has represented that they're going to happen, we're going to be in favor of it. Again, I've already said that. Now I'm repeating myself. But.
Okay, so we voted, and one of the nays is the one that wanted to vote, and we voted. So the vote, Claire, did you get it? So I'm the only, no, two, there were two for it. There were 1, 2, 3, 4 nays and 1 abstention. So 2, 4, 1.
Thank you.
So Marnie, I don't think,
Well, do we
that-
want a motion of what we would vote if those changes were made?
well, that's why I was trying to at least get the straw so that it give her some confidence. That's where we were going to end up.
I think we can take a straw vote.
Okay, so let's do a straw vote. If the amendments that we'd like to see happen at town meeting, what will you think you will do when we officially vote?
I would vote in favor of that.
So Judy, I assume you're still abstaining. So Cook, I voted yes, then I'll vote yes again. AD,
Aye.
okay. Jason,
Will be a yes in that instance.
okay. Tim,
Yes, hey,
okay. AP,
Also, yes.
okay. Mr. Rooney,
No.
okay. So Marnie, you heard that, right? So you've got the 6 people voting 5-1 to say that they believe that they will support it when we actually officially vote after those amendments are made. Okay, I hope that
Okay.
helps.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate the clarity, the conversation, and a very interactive dialogue. You guys have a long night. So thanks for taking so much time with us.
We appreciate you always.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, let's go on to, I think the other two AD are a little bit simpler, I hope. Okay, so let's go to, I think the easiest one, which is the revision to the, they call it the miscellaneous one, which is 34. So did everyone see the email that Karina put together as far as 34 goes? I didn't forward it to you. I didn't see it until this afternoon. She sent it this morning. So I hope you had a chance to read it, because I thought it was well written and made things pretty clear as far as what 34 is trying to accomplish. Okay, so AD, you want to take over with the discussion on 34 as far as what's going on here?
Yes, so this is,
Andrew, before you do that, could you tell me what's broken and what's attempted to be fixed by this? Just kind of a couple sentences that I just don't understand that.
okay, so here, I'm really just gonna read off of this memo that I did over a year ago, because I don't think anything different has changed. That there are there's a state law that gives special protections to alterations or extensions of,
Okay, that's not the one I'm talking about, Andrew. If I got it mixed up, I wanted you to do the miscellaneous one. All right, so you're right. This is 34. So go ahead. So what? Go ahead.
okay, there is a state law. It's part of the chapter 48 of the zoning statute that gives special protection to alterations or extensions of legally pre-existing non-conforming residential single and two-family structures. Okay, so that's that if you have a home and it encroached on a setback a little bit, and then a zoning ordinance was changed and your house was non-conforming, you're grandfathered in, and this just buys you a little leeway to make minor improvements to your property without having to seek a special permit, I think, from the ZBA. And I frankly didn't really give this a whole fresh look this time because it didn't change from when we looked at it in March of 2020. So, the memo I sent is really just like a one-pager. And I think my bottom line is it is beneficial because it gives applicants and the building inspector more specific guidance on when an applicant's proposal doesn't increase the non-conforming nature such that they have a by right entitlement to get their building permit rather than having to have the time and possibly expense of going to the ZBA.
John, the example that they gave is if you had a deck that was deemed non-conforming, but it was conforming when you put it up and you had to replace it because it decayed. Right now, you have to go to the ZBA and start this whole process, where as opposed to just building the deck in the same exact footprint that it has always been.
That's what happened in Southwood. That's a real example. And the reason that the conclusion was that they had a special permit is because it wasn't an alteration or addition. It was a replacement, and the word replacement wasn't in there. So they interpreted it really literally and made that person conclude. The building inspector said, you got to go get a special permit.
So this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's specific to what I think is item 4, if I'm looking at the right version. And it's because I don't understand the language here. When it says, looking at the second sentence, which encroaches upon a required yard or setback area. If for whatever reason I had previously 30, 40 years ago built my deck on somebody else's yard, does this allow me to replace my deck on their yard? That's the only concern I have.
So the way I read that is this 4 is not dealing with encroachment. It's dealing with encroachment into a required yard or setback area. The setback area. I think that's really what it's getting at.
Yeah, it's really the word yard. I mean, if that wasn't there, I'd totally get it. But what like, I don't want people replacing something that's on somebody else's yard.
I just don't read that the intent of that is really to deal with anything like that at all.
I don't think it's intent, that's clear, but it could happen, it sounds like. If you read it literally.
And I'm not crazy, Kathy. Like the word, yard area.
I think it's just kind of referring to specific yard setbacks.
It is. Tim's is saying you could read this so that if you really were in someone else's yard,
And you can state
obviously,
that.
obviously they've got recourse for that. There's other things that would solve that, right?
The fact that required is there, right? It does suggest that it's dealing with, there's a 10-foot setback And your deck is 9 feet from the property line. That's how I read it.
I do too, now that I read it. So it does say required yard.
It should just say required yard setbacks. It's the or. That's
It's the
probably-
or. Yes, I agree with you, Andrew.
Yard.
It's two separate things. The or makes it two separate things.
Yeah, so get rid of the setback for a moment, right? Side of instance which encroaches upon a required yard area. But don't the two attorneys on this agree that the encroachee already has legal recourse to get this solved other ways?
Yes.
So for that reason, Tim, I don't think I would lose sleep over it.
Okay.
Okay. Andrew, isn't this also trying to conform with, and you wrote a great memo on this, trying to conform with mass laws that also deal with this, that we're trying to bring this
Yes.
bylaw into conformance with that overrides anything we would do?
Yes.
So this one seems to be fairly straightforward. Everybody disagrees? And I'm looking to AD and Mr. Rooney to say that this really makes sense.
I think it does make sense.
I mean, if you can
Okay.
alter or whatever the other one was, but you can't replace something that's exactly like it is, that makes no sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the deck example was egregious. All right, I don't see anybody that wants to talk about this anymore, so let's, AD, you want to make a motion on 34?
Move that the advisory committee support at town meeting Article 34.
Second,
Second.
that was Jason Clare. Okay, any further discussion on 34? Okay, roll call vote, Judy,
Support.
Cook is aye, AD,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
AP? Did Andrew Pfaff say yes?
Aye.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. Mr. Rooney?
John had to step away for a second, so it'll be a no vote on this.
Okay, so I don't believe you had an issue with this. So the vote then is going to be 6-0-1. Okay. All right, now let's go to 36, which is what I meant to start with because I thought that was the easier one of the three. Okay, Andrew, AD, you want to go over this one?
Yeah, so, really, I think it's pretty well summarized in Karina Quinn's email. Right now, I believe that minor site plan review is handled by a committee that doesn't necessarily require people who are Southborough residents to be on that committee. So there's been this concern that it poses this problem that you have people that aren't Southborough residents interpreting or, granting relief under this site plan review statute. And that it also raised concerns about open meeting law. I mean, I don't find anything really all that controversial about it, except one thing that I think is very significant, and I don't represent his position, but I think that Sam Stivers has also talked about this at the Board of Selectmen, is that in paragraph F, so it's on page 59 of the current warrant, it strikes a sentence which says, failure of the planning board to so act on an application and notify the applicant within 60 days shall constitute approval of the site plan. So that's a constructive approval provision. So in pretty much every other type of zoning relief that you seek, this is required. Special permits, variances, comprehensive permits, requests for enforcement. And it's not designed to trick anyone. It's just designed to set an outer limit on how long a hearing will go so that a board can't just continue a hearing on and on and on and on. So I think I have a real concern that by taking that out, you now have the potential for a site plan review hearing to just go on and on and on, and there's no clarity about when an applicant could appeal from something. I did a little bit of, I think what Karina's email said, this Aldo's suggestion was to take that sentence out. I just respectfully don't agree. I think that's more of kind of a policy issue rather than a legal issue. I talked to both Aldo and Sam about, okay, do you know of any instances where there actually were constructive approvals? And Aldo was not aware of any, but Sam remembered one where a developer, a board constructively approved something they didn't want to build. So it never actually happened. So my own view is I would not support this unless the constructive approval provision was put back in.
So there's two things here. Andrew, am I correct in that the planning board started off with this just trying to get rid of the small site plan committee? Because they were
Yes.
worried that somebody might challenge it on administrative grounds if they didn't like the result because of OML, because they don't live here, whatever. So that was the purpose of doing this, right? Was to get rid of it.
Yes, just a technical change,
Right.
just like the one we did before.
Aldo gets it, and then he's the one that says, oh, by the way, while you're doing this, get rid of constructive approval.
I don't know for sure, but it was what their email said is what it was, his suggestion to do this.
And you believe that this may not be legal to pull it out?
No, you know what? It probably, because site plan review is not governed by Chapter 40A, I think it's not required to be in there. It's just a matter of, should there be some outer limit on how long a hearing goes? And again, I had talked with Sam about possibly, having some amendment where you give the planning board, instead of 60 days to act upon a application upon receipt, 90, 100, whatever.
With it, if this bylaw gets approved as written, there is no constructive approval. The hearings could go on forever.
Well, it would still say that the planning board is required to act on a complete application and notify in writing the applicant within 60 days of receipt of an application. But then what happens if they don't do that?
There's no consequence if they don't.
There's no consequence for doing it.
Okay, so I believe that Sam is very much in favor of putting the constructive approval back in, if I remember correctly. They've got Aldo looking at that again to see if it can be amended to put it back in, which I think is a little strange. If Aldo's the one that said, take it out, now he's trying to opine whether he can put it back in.
I think he's just making sure that you can adjust it on top of it, which it sounds like as long as you're making it less restricted, not more restricted, you can. But I can't speak for everybody else, but as it's written, I don't support it. If they add that back in.
Okay, so let's break it up. The two parts. Is anyone troubled by the getting rid of the small site plan review committee? Okay, so that one's easy, right? So it's this is the thing that's going to hang this one up. So I don't know what the board of selectmen voted. I don't remember. I know Sam voted against it because he wants a constructive approval back. I don't know if anybody else voted with him or not, but he fully intends to propose an amendment at town meeting as long as Aldo comes back and says that he believes you can amend it to put it back in.
I'd recommend not trying to vote on this, given where we're at right now. I mean, at least in my mind, it's way too uncertain to cast a vote.
Does anyone not think this is strange, though, that it's already in there right now? The bylaw has it in there, right? We've got constructive approval right now, and that the proposed bylaw takes it out, yet there's a question whether you could put something back in that's already in. That doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, he said at the pre-town meeting last night, Aldo said he's on it. He's going to get an answer really quickly. So we'll know before town meeting whether he has ruled or opined that it is legal for the bylaw as proposed to be amended to put something back in that's already in there. Or
And
there
if
was.
it's not, then it fails and we do it at fall time meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so Mr. Mooney would prefer to hold the vote on this one to town meeting till we see what happens, which I think is reasonable because it sounds like there's a few people that have got a problem with the constructive receipt being removed. I think Sam's backup plan, if he can't put it back in, is to change the 60 to 90, Andrew, AD.
Okay. I mean, I still wouldn't support it then, but
But I don't know what that does for you. If the 60 has no teeth, what does the 90 have? I mean, what does that do? That part doesn't make sense either. So is everybody okay with waiting to town meeting? Let's see how this one turns out as far as Aldo's opinion.
Well, I think we
I see
we
Jason
might as well
nodding
do it like we did the Luminaire, show that we don't support it as it's currently written, and show a straw poll that we'd be in support of it if they added the language back in.
well,
Well, I think
don't
you
know.
just either vote or not. I mean, so it looks to me like the majority is going to not support this if the constructive receipt is not put back in.
We voted on the other one. Why not vote on this one?
Okay, all right. Okay, so AD, you want to make a motion on 36?
I move that the advisory committee support at town meeting Article 36.
Okay, second.
Second.
Jason seconded. Any further discussion on 36? All right, roll call vote. Judy,
Support.
Cook, nay. AD,
Nay.
okay, Jason,
Nay.
Tim,
Aye.
AP,
No,
that was a nay.
nay.
Okay, sorry, my ears aren't good. Mr. Mooney?
Nay.
Okay, so Claire, did you get that? 2 in favor, 5 against. So 2-5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so there we go for 34 through 36. All right. All right, I'm going to go back to number 3, Claire. So the continuation of our Board of Health budget discussion. So this is where things stand as of tonight. We are going to have another joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen on Monday. If I can get most of you there at 5:30, I've already checked with Jason because I know he might have had a problem with trying to get kids fed and stuff at 5:30. He said, okay, so if we can start at 5:30 or 6 is probably fine. The joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen starts at 7. Now they're going to meet on other things too, but they'll start with this piece of it. So then we can get that done and we can go our merry way. Jason's got another meeting at 8. So if we could start at 6.
We are not going to meet, Kathy. So Capital's not going to meet on Monday other than joint with BOS.
I'd still like to get ours done so we can be done once we finish with the joint discussion. So we get our other stuff done at 6, unless people want to do it afterwards, but makes it a late meeting. So does anyone have a problem with starting Monday at 6? And probably going to 8 between the 2 meetings.
Kathy, I might. I'm not going to know until Monday morning.
Okay, anybody else besides John? And one of the other reasons we're doing this is because the town election's on the 11th. We possibly could lose an advisory member with that election. And therefore, we're trying to get a couple things done on the 10th that will include the full committee. Okay, which I'll explain in a second. Okay, so it looks like we got 6 out of 7 that are okay with it. So at 6 o'clock on Monday, I'll post it tomorrow morning. That gives me time to get it in. And we should be done by 8 because that gives us an hour with the Board of Selectmen. Now we may have to do the same thing we did before, log into our own meeting at 6 and then log out and log into the BOS meeting, but I'll make that clear when I've got it set up. Okay. So there's going to be 2 things at least to discuss with the Board of Selectmen, which would be the South Union potential sale of the building, which I'll give you the details in a second. And then how to basically deal with the Board of Health budget at town meeting so that hopefully Board of Selectmen and Advisory are on the same page. And we don't end up with 3 competing proposals for budgets that would really confuse the audience. Okay, so South Union, the bids were due today for the building by 10 o'clock. We got 1 bid. And everything I'm saying is public information, so I'm not disclosing something that the public couldn't find if they wanted to. So the bid was $700,000, and it does protect the building facade. The bidder wants to turn the building into 2 condos and then build 3 separate houses on the property. So 5 different abodes on that property. So that's what we got. We got 1.
Is there any affordable housing component to that at all?
There is not specifically, as far as I know, and Jason, feel free to correct me if I say something wrong here. So as far as I know, no. I will try to get the actual bid circulate to everybody in the next tomorrow. But it's my understanding that there is going to be at least an accommodation for a disabled or elderly person that needs an elevator, but it's not specifically for affordable housing.
Yeah,
And what
Kathy,
did
I'm
you-
just gonna, I'll be quiet till Monday night, just because I'm not sure what
Okay.
I have that may not be out there yet, but everything will come out in the BOS meeting on Monday night for people to make an informed decision.
Okay, but I think you should at least correct me if I've said something wrong.
I'm not aware of anything that was incorrect in what you said.
Does anyone think that that number is exceptionally low?
I don't.
I have no context at all.
I do, John.
So AP thinks it's low and KC thinks it's actually a pretty darn good bid for having to renovate a building that needs a lot of renovation to make it habitable. So we'll see. So it's a bid. I don't know what the, Board of Selectmen haven't taken a position yet. This just came in today at 10 o'clock. It literally walked in the door, I think, like at 10 till 10, and the cutoff was 10.
How long do you have to act on it?
I don't know the answer to that either, AD. Usually you have to act. Well, of course, this is different. I was going to say usually you have to. So I don't know.
I don't believe we have to. I don't think it's a binding bid.
The RFP clearly stated we need town meeting support, right? So I think clock would start ticking if BOS brought this forward and town meeting supported it. What that clock is, I think will be open to negotiation, is likely my guess.
Well, you've got to get a P&S negotiated, which will include all that. Okay, so that's what I know. So you should start thinking about it, but I will try to get at least the submission to you in the next 24 hours so you can actually look at it. So be ready for Monday. So there's that one. The second one is our ongoing Board of Health budget issue. So what I'm going to do between now and tomorrow, so you've got the weekend to look at it, is put together a proposed BOH budget that we support, so we know what we'd have to do to amend it at town meeting. Theirs is published, so I'll show that first. Then I'll show next to it what I think is what we believe it should be. There's still a couple questions. Do we leave the $10,000 in there for the scanner? Do we leave the extra money in for the inspection services? And then, so here's probably, so I don't know who saw the email from Mark Purple, but we were awarded the $300,000 grant, the shared services grant that 4 towns get to share. Not only were we awarded it, it is a multi-year grant. It's a 3-year grant that is basically repeatable 3 more times. So they can renew it 3 more times after the first 3 years. So it's really, it could be a 12-year grant at $300,000, so $3.6 million. So it is a significant grant for this town. Finally, here's a big one. So we're going to talk between, that's why I want us to meet first on Monday, so we can talk about what we think the budget should be. So we're ready. I told, and Mr. Healy knows we're doing this. So I said, I'll send it to you guys too, so we can try to work on one spreadsheet together. So by the time we meet with him at 7, we kind of know where we think we are, and then we can discuss it with Board of Selectmen to try to come to an agreement. Then we also need to decide before town meeting how we're going to deal with town meeting, what we're going to say, who's going to say it, et cetera. So we've got to get that together too. So between, the 10th and the 22nd, we've got to get that together. We've got the meeting on the 19th. We can finalize that. But we want the Board of Selectmen to be on the same page as we are, so that again, we're speaking with, I hope, one voice. I did talk to Chelsea Malinowski as to what she's going to do, assuming she is elected on Tuesday, and she's running unopposed. So I would think we should assume that's going to be the case. She doesn't know yet. So we'll see how she handles her new role as far as that goes. But that should kind of be part of this too, as far as trying to make sure we get this done. So anyway, that's all I've got for the moment on that. Any other comments or questions? Anybody have a different path they want to take? I've got a call scheduled with the new IT person tomorrow. And by the way, even though his name is Jason, they call him Jay. So Jay, they didn't want to mix him up with Jason Malinowski, so they're calling him Jay. And my question to him is to talk about the scanner and HIPAA, et cetera. So hopefully I will have some information I can relay to you guys after I talk to him tomorrow as far as where he stands with that. Okay. But as you think about this, the grant, which is coming right now, is actually part of 21 too. So it's 21, 22. It includes inspectional services money, includes nursing money. So 2 of the big line items in this budget is included in this grant. So we've got to be able to use it as far as the things that it's supposed to be for. So kind of work that through your head as far as what you think we should end up with as far as the budget goes.
Is that to be split with other towns, or is that just coming directly to us?
4 towns, Judy. It's going to be Westboro, Northboro, and
Boylston.
Boylston. I was going to say Berlin, Boylston.
Okay.
Okay. And Northboro is in charge of it. So they've actually got administrative control of it. So the money will go into some account that is in Northboro. There is definitely an interest with Northboro as far as talking about some type of regionalization approach with Southboro. They think maybe the other 2 towns too, but that's kind of separate. So, I think this is going where we kind of wanted it to go the first time we talked with Board of Health. Jason?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Right. And remember too, we've got, there is a town meeting proposed and approved by Board of Selectmen for the fall where we can readdress some of these things. So we'll have another chance to truly try to end up where we want to end up to with the Board of Health budget. Okay. All right. So that's all I got to say on that one, unless anybody else has anything else. All right. Okay. This one should be pretty quick. Remember we talked about the language in the actual article for the townhouse facade. So I just want to read this and make sure that we don't have an issue with this. Aldo is he's still trying to opine on this one too. So this is not clear that what they have proposed is going to pass his muster, but this is what it says right now. Okay, so it's a long article, but I'm just reading the part that I'm talking about here. So this article says, the town of Southborough shall retain ownership of the building in perpetuity, except as authorized by a vote of the citizens at a town election with a margin of 90% approval of the total ballots cast.
Now read it again, slower.
Okay.
I read out loud all the time.
Let me just paraphrase it now, Judy. It just says the town can't sell the building unless 90%, there's a vote of the town, not a town meeting, but at the ballot box, of 90% of the people who vote have to vote in favor of selling the building.
Okay.
So in other words, CPC doesn't want to spend $2 million on this building and have the town sell it, even though the likelihood of the town selling the townhouse is probably pretty small. It's not like South Union. It's not stuck out in a corner, barely used, et cetera. It's a much different animal, but they want this in there.
So just going back to something we said before, I mean, I did not know, but I learned recently that, because it was before, I don't think I even lived here, that there was like $100,000 of CPC money that was spent to replace the windows at the South Union School, right? There was not a preservation restriction. Is that, John is nodding his head.
Yeah.
So that's it's just a factor to consider, is that the town did spend some CPC money to make this building better, but now is considering not owning the building. I don't know which way it cuts on how I would consider that, but it's just.
Okay, so
That's
that may
suggested.
be
This is
one
probably
of the
good.
impetuses for doing this, right? So that may be what they remember, and they felt like they put money in that, that for a building that might have gotten sold with no facade restriction, right? So the windows have been moneyed out the door if they had torn the building down.
Don was speaking. He wants to say something.
Kathy, is the funding mechanism for the townhouse CPC bonding or CPC money?
Mostly.
And have we, and I'm not taking a vote on that, correct? We indicated we would hold it until town meeting.
Well,
Yes.
if you had said that, I would. Okay, is he
that-
right, guys? He's right. Okay, so yes.
Okay,
So we haven't voted. But the majority is financed by CPC funds, yes. With a bond.
and are we any closer to voting today, or are we gonna just wait to town meeting?
No, nothing's happened other than we knew this was going to go in. They actually started with 95%, I think, right, Andrew? So they've at least lowered it to 90. But I just want to make sure it's clear that this is in here, because I don't think this is insignificant. Talking about tying your hands. I just don't see how you can legally require a 90% vote. But then I thought, well, we require 2/3 votes on certain things. If it's debt, zoning, or real estate, so maybe it's okay. But Aldo is looking at this as far as whether this really can stay.
And Kathy, the reason for my question is, and I'm not sure we got an answer, and if we did, I'm not sure, I know I didn't remember it. Does the bonding of the townhouse renovations impact CPC future bonding capacity?
Yes.
A lot.
Yeah, there's there. Remember, you can only bond the town portion of the CPC or CPA funds. You can't bond against what you think you're going to get as far as a state match. And if you then take a look at what the bond debt service on this is, there actually is not a lot left over to do a whole lot going forward, which Andrew Mills is going to tell the town. He told us that too. So yes, the long answer to your short question is yes. And I don't know if the people at town meeting think that this will help them approve it with the requirement that you've got to have pretty much the whole town vote to sell it, if you got to sell it or not. I don't know if it impacts them or not. I think they'll think it's a lot of money. That's what will be the big thing.
And I don't want to recreate or go over already plowed ground, but is it the position that these repairs need to be done ASAP as opposed to 2 or 3 years from now?
This has been punted quite a bit of time. I don't know. I mean, I can't answer. Jason probably.
Yeah, I mean, so John, I think it's economies of scale. It's how capital planning looked at it when we advanced it. Was the windows, I think, have been on for at least the last 5 or 6 years on the capital plan, and every year that was the easiest one for BOS and advisory to kind of push off. But then the facade in the masonry snuck up, and when we looked at the cost of doing each of these projects individually versus together, it was a big difference. And then we also factored in just the current cost of bonding in general in mobilizing for a project. We don't want scaffolding going up 4 times in the next 4 years.
Jason, what I'm afraid of, if anybody's looked at construction cost right now, since the pandemic started, they have skyrocketed. lumber, just basic materials. And there's not a real good explanation. Some people think there's a lot of price gouging going on, but they've gone up a lot. So I'm hoping that the numbers we have here, I know there's a contingency in it, but I hope it's enough.
But I think the other thing to think about is, I hear you on that, but they have a lot of work to do. Like they have to still do an RFQ for an OPM, an RFQ for an architect, assuming this passes, right? So it's going to take a while to get this thing going. So, you know, hopefully that those sort of things level themselves out. I hear you.
I hope.
I mean, I really want to see it done before the anniversary in 27.
Well, that's a few years. Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody knew that. That was just a discussion. We're not voting on that. I just want to make sure everybody focused on that in case you have an issue with that kind of vote. Okay, Andrew, you want to take over as far as the
Sure.
MVP grant?
Yeah, can we bring over Melissa, please?
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to text you. Sorry.
No, I figured we were cool.
She is there though.
Yeah, so guys, this is basically what I've been working for the last couple months with Melissa on putting together a grant proposal for impervious surface mapping. It uses the GIS high resolution images done by the state like last year to calculate the impervious surface for each property in town. And there's a lot of good purposes for this. It's part of what we've kind of committed to the DEP in terms of some of our regulations. Could be used for creating the survey's surface plan for stormwater. And also we could use it if we want to do a stormwater usage fee cost allocation methodology in the future. But the basic idea is that the cost would be probably around $30,500, which is what it cost the town of Holyoke, which is a little bit bigger than us last year to do. And we would be on the hook for a match of 25%, which would be about $7,625. We also can count some of Melissa's time towards it, so it may be actually a little bit less than that. So I'm basically asking that the committee supports a reserve fund transfer to cover that if the grant is selected.
The match. So when you say Melissa's time, you're saying that her time could count toward the match?
Correct.
So the value of her time.
Andrew, how do you bring this within the umbrella of the reserve transfer?
It's unknown, unexpected. I mean, we didn't know about this, or we weren't even past the ability to apply for MVP grants until this year. So obviously it wasn't part of the budget process from last year.
What does MVP stand for?
Municipal Vulnerability Planning?
Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program.
Preparedness, okay.
Hello, Melissa.
Hi.
Welcome back.
And they did talk about it at Selectmen last night, and the Selectmen were supportive of it. I think, Melissa, you also have a letter from the DCR in support of the analysis as well.
Correct, yes.
DCR supporting Southborough doing it, or everybody doing it?
Southborough for this specific project, yes. It will aid in their efforts for educational outreach as well, knowing the impervious areas around the reservoir.
But Southborough is no different than any other town. Every town has got blacktop, right? So any town could apply for this?
As long as they're an MVP community, yep.
Okay.
Is there any concern that this may be a tortured application or category for reserve fund transfer?
The application won't be tortured. All we got to do is basically confirm by signing it that we're going to provide the 25% match. They won't care where it's coming from, but we, as the advisory committee, know what our rules are. So we've got to decide whether we think it's an appropriate use of reserve funds. So it's really up to us. This really is our bailiwick, period. So Andrew, can you go back over the uses for this and go a little bit slower? So the third one I'm most interested in, but can you do them again as far as what the advantages, what we're going to get out of this grant?
So basically they're gonna look at the town and they're gonna calculate different types of impervious surface, building, roads, sidewalks, pools, a few other categories. We would have then that information by property, and we could do a lot with it. We can use that as part of our mandated EPA MS4 permit application. We're supposed to be trying to reduce our impervious surface as part of that. We can also put that together to work on an impervious surface reduction plan, which is definitely favorable to the state and also better for the environment.
Are we doing that already?
It's part of our plan. We have not done it yet. We were actually supposed to have done it, I think, by now, but it hasn't been done yet. And then on top of that, other towns have used this information to come up with a stormwater usage fee, which we are looking at a new EPA permit, stormwater permit coming up June 30th of 2022, which may cost the town additional funds to meet that compliance in terms of different things. So a lot of towns are looking at doing this type of analysis prior to any of that new regulation come on, so that they know kind of what they're going to need to do and the cost for that. And if we need to, using the stormwater usage fee and using the impervious surface, it really will allocate that additional cost for stormwater permit, regulations towards the people that are creating the most stormwater, as opposed to currently we do it just based on property tax.
When do we have to get the new permit?
6/30/22, our current one expires.
Okay,
So-
and what do we think the cost of that would be?
It's tough to tell. Melissa, I don't know if you have any indications. A
Yeah, I
lot of
don't-
towns in the area are between 400 and additional 700,000, but Melissa.
Yeah, they haven't quite, the way they structure their MS4 and their EPA NPDES permits, it's very backwards in the sense of they modify existing permits as they go along. So the modifications to the new permit might not be known. I don't think they've been released yet. I was trying to look today for some differences, and the only ones we found were for 2020 for the modifications to the 2016 MS4 permit. So they're very lagged, and it's very difficult to understand what some of those new changes will be. It's mostly, I think, very related to what Andrew went over in terms of, mostly monitoring and maintenance cost of water quality and stormwater features are the biggest ones that we would get hit with, which, are costly, and which is something that we don't really have a budget for to do in terms of a lot of the town-owned stormwater systems.
You renew the permit every 4 years?
It's 5-year
5
permit.
years?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm confused. Are we talking about the cost of renewing the permit? Or are we talking about the cost of doing what we're supposed to be doing?
It's the cost of the actions that are required to comply with the EPA and DEP standards for municipal stormwater systems.
So we've got a plan of what we're supposed to do. We're not doing any of it at this point. Is that true?
No, not that we're not doing anything. DPW is the kind of lead on this. So Karen is the one who mostly orchestrates the actions. She partners with PAR Corporation, who does a lot of the other engineering in town as well. And I know they do things like the yearly reports to EPA and DEP. They go and inspect outfalls and inspect detention basins and anything, and note specifics that need to be addressed now. And we also do a lot of the educational outreach. I can be happy to send around what our MS4 permit looks like and those specific items. Some are very specific in terms of developing like a impervious surface reduction plan, while others are more, outreach, which we do in terms of the Think Blue flyers or educational materials for the kids, along with, what was the other one that I was just thinking? Some of it also falls under the CONCOM in the sense of the stormwater and erosion control bylaw. So it's my inspections for those and just ongoing requirements for erosion controls during construction.
Hey, Melissa, thank you for your, I don't know you, for your dedication, commitment. You're tremendous source of knowledge. Thank you. It's nice to, unfortunately, I guess this is the call meeting. Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. You as well.
So Melissa, I'm still trying to understand. Are we supposed to have $700,000 in our budget for fiscal year 22 to apply for the new permit?
No, so it's not an application fee. It's different actions that it's essentially like a 5-year strategic plan. And most of these actions you pick, I guess horribly to say, from a drop down. You know, they give you a lot of suggestions that kind of fit the standard bill. It's just the changes moving forward. We don't know what additional might be coming in terms of necessities, whether it's more stringent pollutant loads or testing and things of that nature.
So
And
Kathy,
you think
for
wholly
the
oak
new,
is the right number to use here, Andrew?
well, so for the permit, so for when we get the new permit, right? So as part of that, you're applying and you're doing 3-year strategic plan. So they could say, okay, your last permit allowed this, pollutant load. Now it's this, and so we are over that threshold, which means we now have to put in like a treatment facility, which can be in the millions of dollars. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but a lot of towns are getting some of this information to be ready for that. And part of it today is looking at the impervious surface and reducing that. So we're just trying to use this information to get ahead of that. And if there is a significant cost, looking at additional ways to fund that additional stormwater work outside of our regular property tax.
So Melissa, I know we're getting a little bit off what we're trying to do here, which is vote on whether we're going to match this grant. But I think we got to understand it before we get to whether we want to use reserve fund for this. Who is overall in charge of this? Is it DPW or is it conservation?
It is DPW. They're the ones who submit the MS4 permit.
So Jason, I assume there's nothing in the capital plan for this, as far as I know, right?
Well, it's also a cost thing, right? To be in the capital plan has to be greater than 10K.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about all the things that we might have to do.
Well, there's a refresh. There'll be the annual refresh is coming up. So I guess if there are things that need to go in, regardless of what year.
And this would probably be, it would start FY23, right? So, and then it's a 5-year horizon to implement. So it's something a little bit more in the future. We're just trying to get ahead of it.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions about what the grant would actually be used for if we got it? So we can get to our fundamental question, whether we think this is a good use of reserve fund. So this would use the reserve fund for fiscal year 21. Right now, the only use that we know of at this point is the antenna that had to be replaced at EMC that was bought upside down. So we know that. We know now that we do not have to worry about the backstop on the nurse and Director of Board of Health. The CARES money is covering that. So that's not going to happen. So we've got money to do this. That's not a question, unless there's something out there that I don't know about. And I've been told there's not a lot out there, at least as of today. So we could do it if we wanted to do it. That's not an issue. But the question Mr. Mooney asked is a fundamental one. Is this something that we think meets the definition for what reserve fund should be used for? So
Yeah, I'm not usually a strict constructionist, but I'm having a difficult time justifying or qualifying or categorizing this as a rainy day issue as I kind of see the fund set up.
I think it's certainly an unforeseen expenditure. It wasn't on the horizon last year when we made the budget. Maybe we would have included it specifically in Karen's budget or capital planning or advisory's budget or Concom to pay for it. But at that point in time, Melissa, I don't think we had gotten selected as an MVP. And this is the only MVP application that we're doing this year.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm not that concerned about this one. I'm just concerned about setting, a precedent moving forward.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, John.
I think everything.
that we can't be the source of matching any grant that someone comes up with. That's what I think John's saying. So I think I agree with that.
Have we looked at other departments? I don't know, conservation, DPW, et cetera, because I think an easier path here is there's a lot of things that we probably didn't spend this year because we thought things may open up a little sooner. That might be an easier path here without kind of crossing the line of what isn't a reserve fund transfer. And I just don't, if we've explored it and struck out and we're the last backstop, but there's a lot of unspent money right now.
We have not explored it. Melissa, have you looked at your budget to see if you've got anything left over in it for fiscal year 21 that you're not going to spend?
Unfortunately, no. We were waiting to see if we received another grant for Breakneck Hill, which we did not receive, unfortunately. So we'll be utilizing a lot of that money for some of the activities we were doing.
All right, so your budget doesn't have the money to do it. DPW, who knows whether she's got money left in that one or not. I've been told that there was a time when I was told she was probably going to need a reserve fund transfer. Now I'm told that probably not, but I don't know that for sure. So that'd be the budget to look at to see if there's anything left in that one.
Yeah, and just so people know, the application is due Friday. So that's kind of the urgency and one of the reasons why we came here.
And Andrew, would it have to be funded before June 30th? Or you just, like, if one would actually check be cut? Like, grants take a while, right, to actually go through a process? Because that's what I'm just wondering if it actually is FY21.
And I'm not sure exactly when they're going to let us know, to be honest. I don't know if it's going to be a 21 or a 22.
Andrew, when did you say we have to decide by?
Friday.
This Friday. So, Andrew, just to be clear, no one's talked to Karen about funding this, right?
No, I made her aware that we were discussing this, but other than that, no, we have not asked her to put up the 7,000. She might have it in her budget. I'm not sure, but if we could always cross that bridge when we get to it. But if we can have a commitment of advisory as kind of the funding source to submit our application, we might not even get the grant, and then we don't have to worry about the match. We can also see if Karen maybe has some.
So we're going to have to vote tonight one way or another because we're not going to meet before Friday. So we've got to at least say yay or nay to the reserve fund tonight. We could vote that we would be we learn to be the backstop, right? We'll be the backstop again if Karen's budget won't accommodate it. So we could vote it that way.
Can you review the numbers again? What would be the reserve fund transfer? What's left in the reserve fund?
It would be an estimated $30,500 for the analysis. We would do 25% as a match, which would be a maximum of $77,625, plus less, probably because of Melissa's time can be added to that grant match. And then Kathy, I believe from a reserve fund, we just had the antennas, which was 5 or 6 K.
6,000.
So
8,400 is the EMC antenna. And I'm not sure we're going to pay for all that our reserve fund. Depends on where their budget ends up. So they ran it through the fire department budget first to see where it ends up at the end of the year. But potentially, the most it would be 8,400. Let's see, cost. Okay, I take it back. 8,400 is the cost, but they've got 4K in their budget. So it looks like our max amount would be about 4,400 we'd have to use. So we haven't used any of it. So there's
but remember the 4K, I wouldn't use, because the 4K is to support other things. It wasn't to support an antenna. So I think when they came to us, we approved the 8, right?
Yes. So the note I made was costs will initially be charged. The fire department budget line item, radio communication line item only has 4K budgeted. So we'll initially take the account negative. We will see where the fire's overall budget ends up and decide whether reserve fund transfer. Okay, so let's just make it easy. The worst is we're going to do a reserve fund transfer as 8,400.
We clearly have the money. It's a matter of where everyone stands on whether this
I
is
agree. So
reserve
it's not a
fund
question of the money. The money's there. Okay, so AD, what do you think is a reserve fund transfer?
I think Andrew Pfaff has made a good case for it. And just, 2 points. This is one of those things where it's, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong. You want this money because it's an expenditure of money that's going to save us money in the long run. It has the potential to, right?
To make us money. The third thing he said was, we might come up with a program where you carve out from real estate taxes. You basically have a separate fee for it, right? And it might put more of the burden of that fee on. It apply to everybody. not just those that are subject to real estate taxes, so apply to everyone, commercial, not-for-profit, et cetera. So it might take some pressure off the residential real estate taxes if we were to be able to do that.
And
But
so
that's a, that's a maybe. There's no sure thing there.
but so this is, I just, you're naturally compare it to the whole Board of Health discussion. And I don't even remember what we ended up. I know I was not in favor of using. Prospectively voting for a reserve fund transfer for fiscal year 22 to fund, that thing. This is different. This is not using a reserve fund transfer to staff an entire department for a whole year or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to support it because, Andrew has explained there are a lot of long-term, potential long-term fiscal benefits from going down the path that Andrew is interested in, and Melissa, working together on this.
And I will say, being the longest member of advisory along with Judy, reserve fund transfers historically have had a pretty broad definition. As far as, we've done things like studies that we wanted to do. We funded those, et cetera. Public Building Safety Committee studies, Andrew and Jason. So we have definitely expanded the definition over the years. We have not been strict constructionists of this. This is, we like to encourage people to get grants. We like, if we can get a grant that pays for 75% of it, that's a good thing, right? Of something that we think we need. Not just go get grants just to get grants. So there definitely is some arguments to do this. So I think we probably could fit it under the umbrella of not being expected that this was going to come up. But I don't think the reserve fund should be the fallback for all grant matches. I will say that going forward. So that is a little worrisome. So, Tim, what do you think?
Yes, I'm in favor.
Okay. Any further discussion before we actually take a vote on whether to use the reserve fund transfer? I still think that we should go to Karen Galligan tomorrow and see if she's got it in her budget first, and that the reserve fund transfer should be second. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, John?
Yeah, I disagree. I think we should broaden it that we search all town budgets and not just the DPW for unspent money. And if, as a result of that search, we don't come up with the requisite money, then I could probably vote in favor of reserve fund transfer.
I just don't know how we do that. Budgets, I don't know how we go to every budget and say, do you have money left over when it has nothing to do with that budget?
We could pay it out of Karen's engineering budget, and then if she needs to reserve fund transfer at the end of the year, because of it, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But we would, we'd have to commit to that kind of a concept, right?
So, John, I just don't see how we practically do what you just said. Number one, we don't have much time. Number two, I don't see how you just go to any budget and say, can you got some money you didn't spend. Let's use it for something. Nothing to do with your.
Just trying to find a way to distinguish this from future grant requests for reserve fund transfers. In other words, there are multiple steps that need to be taken. And if those steps do not result in uncovering coverage for the grant, then we would consider a reserve fund transfer. That's why I added that, Kathy, but I hear what you're saying.
Kathy, I think normally I would be a no on this because I don't think it really is a reserve fund transfer, but I think we've had 2 federal packages this year that essentially have been the reserve fund for the town for the year, for better or for worse. And I think that's why we're sitting here talking about, we've had one item essentially be approved. So I would just say in the future, I'm not in favor of grant funding matches coming through the reserve fund. And I would like to have seen this more than 2 days before the application was due, because I imagine the application didn't come out last week. But I also say that when I don't want to take away from all the work that Melissa and Andrew have done, because I do think we have to take a longer term view here of the potential benefit to the community.
Yeah,
There was
and
confusion with the date, so it wasn't done
it
intentionally.
was, yeah, it was supposed to be due 6:30, so we were gonna, Kathy, I'd asked her to table this till after town meeting. But then we found out 2 days ago that it was actually the 7th, and we're scrambling a bit.
So Jason, it's not unusual. We don't have a lot of reserve fund transfers during the year. It's only at the end of the year where, they start looking at where people have gone over budgets and et cetera, that they start putting together reserve fund transfers. So I'm not surprised we don't have a whole lot at this point.
Yeah, but I think it's trending well if you look at actuals too. Like, I think there's no department.
I agree. I
that's-
think it's trending well because we've had so much not spent because of COVID. Is where
Yeah.
it's trending well. You just there's a lot of things that didn't get spent this year
Are
because things weren't.
are we aware of any potential additional requests coming in?
The only one I've heard of so far, and it's been retracted so far, is Karen Galligan had some issues with the hopper earlier on. I remember we've always expected her to have some money that needs to be spent there per discussion with John Butler. So that's the only one I heard of, but then I've heard she's okay. So I don't know, the winter wasn't horrible, right? It was kind of, I think, a normal winter.
Fire is likely coming with something under 5,000. The boat is not staying inflated right now.
What did you say, Jason? The last time?
Fire.
Yeah.
I've asked the chief a few times, but their boat is not staying inflated. But it's a less than $5,000 cost to get a new one.
And they need to get that done now, I
Well,
guess.
if they need a boat. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, he hasn't come before us. We're not taking action on it, but.
All right, so we don't think so.
Yeah. So Andrew, what's the number you need? 7.
Maximum 7,625, but likely it'll be less than that.
Okay. So I'm going to
Melissa's
move.
time is very valuable.
So I'm going to move that the advisory committee support a potential reserve fund transfer of 7,500
625.
625. After looking at the DPW budget for consideration only of an FY21 reserve fund transfer.
Okay.
I don't want to bind advisory of next year, is basically my point.
Okay, all right, I think that's the way it should be. We've made one exception, which is unusual. Okay, do I have a second on Jason's motion with all the caveats?
Second.
Okay, all right, any further discussion on the motion?
I think, Kathy, my only concern is that we might not know before the end of fiscal year 21 whether or not we.
Well, then we'll have to vote it again. So we'll vote it again. So what we'll have to do.
But the question is, do we have enough to apply for the grant with that caveat?
Well, you haven't approved the FY22 budget yet. In general, for any department.
Yeah, but they just need something from, basically from Mark stating that, yes, we will pay for it.
So Jason's motion does not necessarily accomplish that. But he's right. We should not be appropriating fiscal year 22 reserve fund. This group, the group that needs to do that is who's on the advisory committee next year. We've made the one exception with Board of Health for reasons we know. So I agree with that. So who's signing this? Mr. Purple? AP?
Yep.
So I say we vote on the motion as Jason has said it, and then make sure Mark's aware of that and see what he says. We can talk to Karen and make sure that she's aware of, we may need her to run this through her fiscal year 22 budget, see if she's got anything she's come up with recently that she thinks she's got a little cushion there. So that Mark's assured that when we say we're going to match this, we're going to match it. That's all I know to do. I think it'll work out.
So do you want to delay the vote?
No, we got to do it tonight.
Let's
Because I'm
vote.
pretty sure he won't sign it unless we've got the vote tonight. He said it's in our hands. That's Mr. Purple's words. It's in our hands now. Okay. So I'll make sure he understands what the motion is and see what he says. So we've had a motion, second, we've discussed it. Roll call vote, Judy,
Buds, yes.
Cook, aye, AD,
I,
Jason,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
AP,
Abstain.
Mr. Rooney.
Aye.
Okay, so Claire 601 with Andrew Pfaff abstaining. Okay,
Right.
all right. I'll report back on Monday as far as that one goes. All right. Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
Andrew.
Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa, absolutely, for coming out tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, I've basically, chair report, I've really reported everything that was on my chair report already with things I've said, so I'm done with that. Any public comment? See none. Okay, any other business properly brought forth from anyone else? Okay, so
we
now
do those minutes of them before.
I struck the minutes.
Okay,
And
all right.
we're going to do that Monday. So this is the plan for Monday. When we meet first, we're going to try to get all the minutes caught up and approved. We're going to talk about the Board of Health budget that we would like to see the printed one amended to. We won't talk about South Union any further unless someone has something to say till we get with the Board of Selectmen. We will, let's see. We're going to talk about the water budget on Monday, and we're going to talk about Article 14, which is the revolving funds on Monday. So we've got a few things to do before we get with the Board of Selectmen. And if we start at 6, we should be able to get all those done by 7 and then meet with the Board of Selectmen on Board of Health in South Union. Sound like a plan? Okay. All right, as far as further meetings go, we've got 5/19 scheduled. Then we've got the ATM on May 22nd. And just to remind people how it works, it's going to start at 10. It's going to go to 1. They're going to break for lunch from 1 to 2, start back at 2 and go to 5 and stop at 5. If we're not done, we stop and then we come back on Sunday. And I think it's 10 o'clock on Sunday, but I'm not sure. Does anybody remember what time we start on Sunday? I'm not sure they said it last night, Jason.
I believe they did.
So anyway, we may get to on Saturday. It probably depends on how a couple articles go, with Board of Health being one of them.
Tim Lett said in the chat, yes, Sunday, 10 o'clock.
Who said that?
Tim
Tim
Lett.
Litt? Okay. All right. So everybody got that. So everybody should be there, 9 o'clock or so we can talk about things. So I'll post a meeting at 9 o'clock. In case we've got something to talk about when we get there. Hopefully we've got good weather. But I guess it's going to be like last year that we just sit on seats in the front. I'm going to ask for a table so that we've got at least a table in front of us to put things on. But there's not going to be any reports, any red reports. They're going to put that in the consent agenda. At least that's their plan currently. So it's going to be pretty similar to last year as far as the format goes. All right. They do right now. They think there's going to be more people just because there's going to be a lot of people there that will have been vaccinated. Okay, so the other 2 meetings I would like to talk about are June. So I'm going to propose 2 meetings, 2 weeks apart, but do we want to start on the 2nd of June, which would be 2 days after Memorial Day, or do we want to start on the 9th? So we can either do the 2nd and then 2 weeks after that, which would be the 16th, or we can do the 9th and 2 weeks after that, which would be the 23rd. So does anyone, and let me tell you why I'm worried to make sure we can do this is if we're down to 6 members at that point, we can only lose 1 and not have a quorum. The town meeting vote may have taken place, but it's not effective yet as far as 7 members. It's not effective until the AG approves the bylaws. So we're still got a 9-member committee until that gets approved. So we still have to have 5 people here. If Andrew D gets elected to Board of Selectmen, he won't be there. So we're down to 6. So I want to make sure that those 2 dates in June seem to work for everybody as far as they know right now. And Jason, I'll talk about the time in a second. Okay, so no one said they didn't. So is there a preference on 6/2 or 6/9 as far as the first meeting? Do you want to put the whole week of Memorial Day, take that off and start on June 9th, or do you want to start on June 2nd? Anybody? I don't care. Does anybody care?
I don't care.
Okay. All right. So let's do the June 9th and June 23rd as far as the meetings in June. Okay, now as far as time goes, Jason is coaching his little boys baseball team, and he can't get here at 6:30 until after June. So does,
Kathy, it would just apply to the 9th. The 23rd will be done.
okay, so it applied to the 19th and the 9th, right? The 19th of May?
May 19th, yeah, and the 9th,
Okay,
yeah.
so 2 meetings. So what I'm proposing, and Judy, don't get mad, starting at 7:30, like as far as we used to, so that we can make sure that Jason could come to those 2 meetings.
Why would I get mad?
Because
7:30 in the morning?
you go to bed, yeah, 7:30 in the morning. Anyway, I don't think
It gets even.
the 19th will be a long meeting, but we've got a laundry list of stuff to talk about once town meeting's over with. So we'll use the 9th to do our planning and figure out. So it won't be a long meeting either. So neither one will be long. So we start at 7:30, we'll be done by 9:30 at the latest. Okay, can we all do that?
Mhm.
The drivers are used to start at 7:30 and we'd go till pretty late. All right, so that's our plan as far as schedule goes. All right, anything else before we adjourn? All right, so Monday at 6 o'clock, we will post a separate advisory meeting for,
Joe
6
Litt
o'clock.
has his hand up, by the way.
So can you bring him in, Jason? So we've got Tim Litt here wanting to say something. Hi, Tim.
Hi, sorry, my fingers went faster than my brain. Sunday town meeting, if it goes that far, will start at 1 p.m., not 10 in the morning,
Okay, thank you.
according to my notes.
Okay, that actually makes sense. Okay, so everybody
Sorry
got
about
that?
that.
That's okay. All right, so assuming nothing else, Judy, you want to make a motion?
To adjourn?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Yes, I move we adjourn.
Okay. Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All right, roll call vote, Judy,
Yes.
Cook, aye, AD,
All right.
Jason,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
AP.
Aye.
Mr. Rooney. All right, 7-0. All right, so everybody, Monday, and expect a few emails between now and then.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, bye, everybody.
Aye.